Hey guys, my name is Sabir Bhatti and welcome to another episode of the Sabir Bhatti Show, the place where I interview interesting people with interesting life stories. And there's no doubt today's guest is very interesting indeed. My guest today is Tracy Hannigan, also known as Tracy the Sleep Coach. As well as being a certified health coach, Tracy is a cognitive behavior therapy and acceptance and commitment therapy trained sleep coach. She helps people overcome insomnia. If you're on social media, you can check her out on Instagram using the handle at Tracy the Sleep Coach. She also has a fabulous website as well, so please do go check her out there using her website, tracythesleepcoach.co.uk. Super excited about this episode. So a very warm welcome to Tracy Hannigan. Hello.
Thank you for having me on the show. I'm really excited.
Thank you so much for joining me. It's an absolute pleasure. I've been waiting a very long time actually to have an episode all to do with sleep, and I was extremely excited and thrilled when you agreed to come on the show. So thank you once again. So I want to start by actually talking a bit about your own experience with sleep problems and insomnia, because I know you had your own personal experiences in the past. And if I'm not mistaken, it all began with your late husband, who you were a carer for. And I believe it was your late husband who also suffered from insomnia. And shortly after this, you also experienced sleepless nights. So with your permission, I just wanted to get your take on this episode and how it all came to life.
Right. So as is really common, usually kind of stressful sort of trigger can set somebody on the path of potentially developing insomnia. And obviously losing my husband was a particularly big trauma. A bereavement is a really common scenario for this kind of developing. And I remember really vividly the night that he passed away, and they took him away because he died at home. And my best friend stayed with me in the house, and she had somebody come she had a tiny little baby. She had somebody come pick up the baby, and she just stayed with me that night. And that was the last night I remembered for a really long time that I actually slept. And where it went from there was just this kind of downward spiral of obviously experiencing the loss and doing the kind of the grieving and trying to manage all sorts of things that I was, I've never had to do some of these things, like, plan memorials and go through probate and all of this other sort of stuff. It was really stressful. I was quite young, and I just slept less than I was really comfortable with. And then I was starting to worry about that particular loss of sleep. And it just began to kind of spiral out of control, really. So that was my first episode in kind of longer term insomnia. Lasted many years, eventually resolved, and I had another one again in my early through mid 30s as well.
Okay. And it's very interesting because I was going through some of your content, which is fabulous, by the way, online, on your website, on Instagram. I really admire the way you come across, and you're really passionate about your work when it comes to helping people with insomnia. And you describe yourself as a passionate and compassionate evidence-based sleep coach. And that's what I wanted to touch on for a few minutes, if that's okay. I wanted to touch on the aspect of the evidence-based sleep coach, because your work is based on cognitive behavioral therapy, which is evidence-based. And I also noticed on one of your posts on Instagram, you made your followers aware that there are many scams out there claiming that they can actually help you with sleep problems, but in fact, it's not evidence-based at all. And they often target vulnerable and desperate sleep sufferers. So I wanted to speak for a few minutes about this. How much of a problem is this?
I think it's a huge problem. It's a big moneymaker. There are a lot of people out there really suffering from sleep problems, and it's relatively easy to market a product that can be purchased, and so lots of people do that. the unfortunate thing about CBTI, even though it has over 30 years of evidence behind it, even though it is the first line recommended treatment, a lot of people don't know about it because it tends to be, it has to be offered by somebody who is a therapist of some sort, who is trained in it, rather than a salesperson. So it's a lot less sexy, right? It's not an instant fix. It's not something that you can just take and it's going to make the problem go away. But
Yeah.
obviously, people who are really desperate for sleep and feel really rubbish about not sleeping well, they obviously want the thing that's going to help them the fastest, and they're just not always aware that there are more viable, more long-term options available. So I see it as a huge problem, and actually it's almost like the industry feeds the problem by teasing the promise of a quick fix. Do this thing, do that thing, do that thing. And people come to me saying, oh, I've done all the things and it hasn't helped. And it actually creates more of a problem because it generates sleep anxiety. People think that there's something wrong with them because this thing that's supposed to work isn't working. There must be something wrong with my sleep is broken.
Yeah.
But really what happens is going through this whole process tends to distance people from their natural sleep ability. So it kind of feeds on itself. Yeah, it's a big problem.
Yeah. And another very interesting piece of information that I came across with regards to your work online is your emphasis on why, trying to understand our why in relation to our sleep. And it was very touching actually, because I saw one of your posts where you said that you wanted to improve your own sleep so that you could spend quality, fresh, and energized time with your son. And this was a post I believe you put out perhaps a few weeks or even maybe a couple of months ago. And I found that really sweet and quite touching.
Oh.
So could you perhaps touch on the reasons on the importance of understanding our why in this regard in relation to our sleep?
Yeah, I think it's important to understand kind of what really fundamentally motivates us. And in the kind of the sleep space, people who are trying to improve their sleep tend to be motivated by the things that are generated by the fear, right? The fear of what am I going to feel like tomorrow? What's going to happen the next day? How am I going to behave with my spouse? Am I going to be able to do these things at work? They're all very fear-based motivators. If you dig underneath those things, the real fundamental things are usually what we want to have in our life, which is we want connections with people that are close to us. We want to have energy to put into the things that we love. We want to be part of a work community. If that's the kind of work you do, you want to feel like you're contributing something. So really understanding those whys and focusing on those is, I think, much healthier than focusing on the things that generate fear. And a lot of the things that generate those fears tend to be either not based on fact or they're exaggerations, because certain things happen to the way we think, and the amount of creative potential that we have in our thinking when we're not sleeping very well. We become very linear, we become very focused on negative things, and there's a whole host of reasons why that is, but it just makes the problem worse. So I always ask people, what's really underneath that? If your main concern is how you're going to perform at work, what does that work give you? What is it? Well, how does it make you feel? Does it make you feel really good, and why? And just kind of digging under those whys, I think, is a much healthier place to hang people's efforts toward improving their sleep.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it makes complete sense. And when I came across that online with your work, I found that quite profound because it's a different perspective, isn't it? When we're trying to tackle our sleep problems, it's looking at it from a different angle, which is quite powerful. And I've been very much guilty of this myself over the last few months. And that's why I wanted to have an episode on this, because it's something that I've been suffering with, an inability to plan my day and to plan it around knowing how much time I need to sleep. And you also mentioned on your website, I believe, that we often fall into the trap of adopting our sleep to our day as opposed to the other way around, where we should, in fact, instead be perhaps managing our day-to-day life around our sleep. But we sometimes do it the other way around, where we're sacrificing our sleep. So What would be, say,
Mm.
your one tip, or perhaps more than one tip, of how we can transition away from this way of thinking when it comes to sleep?
Yeah. For people who don't have insomnia and people who burn the candle at all ends,
Mm,
we do start doing those. The people do those calculations because they believe they need a certain amount of hours in order to do the things they want to do. So based on reality. And so I ask people to kind of pick those things apart. And what happens with people who struggle with sleep issues for a long time is they fill the frame of their life with fewer and fewer things that matter to them. So again, it kind of goes back to this why. If I feel like I'm not going to be social enough for my friends, I stop seeing my friends. So a big piece that used to be friendship space gets smaller and flatter and duller. Same thing with work, avoiding things, not putting yourself up for promotions. We start excluding all of the things that are most important to us because the sleep issue becomes bigger and bigger and bigger and starts to fill out that frame even more. So my number one tip around kind of time management is do not give sleeplessness the power to do that. And the way you give it power to do that is by doing it. So maintain your friendships, maintain those connections, keep doing the things that are valuable and important for you to have like a fulfilled life, because the happier and richer your life is, the more likely your sleep is to improve. If you allow the idea of fixing the sleeping problem to fill the entire frame of your life, one, it's not much of a life. You can still have these other things in your life, even if you're not sleeping really well. That just feeds the problem.
sure. And while you were speaking there, you mentioned about the hours that we give to our sleep. And I wanted you to just maybe clarify this point for us, because we often hear that you need to sleep for X number of hours. So
Mm-hmm.
it could be 7 hours, 8 hours, 9 hours. And I find this quite confusing because there doesn't seem to be a set number that's correct. So is it the case that we should all have a fixed number of hours, or do these hours change depending on the individual?
That's a really good question. So each individual sleep need is genetically determined.
Mm,
Some people, what do I mean by need? An ideal amount of sleep for a given individual. We generally say there's no issue with anybody's sleep if they're falling asleep within 20 minutes. If they wake up a few times in the night, remember it, but they fall back to sleep okay, and they feel refreshed and energized and able to do the things they want to do during the day. Whatever that number is that person's number. And when we get to that point in doing CBTI and the kind of work that I do, that's when you're on the road and we start just talking about relapse prevention. So that's the number. Now, there are some people who only need 5 or 6 hours of sleep. There's some people who need 7, some people need 8, some people need 9. The curve is wide. And saying somebody needs 8 hours is like saying everybody needs to wear size 8 jeans. You know, this one size fits all is not helpful. And if you are a person who only needs 6.5 hours of sleep, and you become scared by these messages that say, if you don't get 8 hours, you're going to have strokes and all this other stuff, which is not related to insomnia, it's related to other sleep disorders. And you start trying to get 8 hours, you're actually going to ruin the sleep that you've already got.
right.
From the anxiety about it, from doing things like staying in bed too much and going chasing sleep, even though you don't need it. If you think that you need it and you start developing those behaviors, you can actually give yourself insomnia.
Very interesting. Very
Mm.
interesting. Yeah, because that's something that we hear a lot about. If you don't sleep 8 hours, you're going to be tired. If you don't get 7 hours, you'll be very tired. So it can be a bit confusing. So
Yeah.
how would somebody first start the step towards realizing or finding out what's their prime number? How do you go about it? What's the first step? So someone who just wants an idea of how much sleep should I be getting?
Mm-hmm. If somebody doesn't have any sleeping troubles, whatever number they seem to get is that
Mm,
number. And there's some flexibility. There's some flexibility in that. So if you ask
right.
a good sleeper, how do you ensure that you get the amount of sleep that you need? They don't really usually have an answer for that because they've not had to think about it. In people who are going through CBTI, we start using certain kinds of techniques that compress people's sleep, so they're getting less than would be their personal ideal, but it's kind of compressed and consolidated and improved quality, so it gets less broken and less light gets deeper. And then when you start expanding that out, eventually you find out what that person's number is, because they're falling asleep within 20 minutes, they're not having difficulty falling back to sleep, and they feel fine during the day. So that would be that's kind of the experiment with people who are struggling with sleep and go through more of a sort of a CBTI process. People who don't have sleeping problems, if you go to bed when you're sleepy and you wake up naturally without an alarm and you feel fine during the day, that's probably your number.
Right. Okay. And just for a couple of minutes, I also want to touch on social media and other apps that we use on our phone continuously. And there's also a tendency to glance at our phone for a few minutes before we sleep, or maybe the first thing when we wake up. And I'm sure it's something you've heard about a lot as well. Is it really as bad as they say it is to be glancing at your phone before and after you sleep, or should it be done in moderation? What would you say?
I think for the average person who doesn't have issues sleeping, it's not that big of a deal in general,
Right.
especially if you're able to use the warm light features on your phone, which are pretty ubiquitous now. In general, any color light really close to your face for an extended period is not great. The issue with what you're looking at, though, is sometimes you might come across something that's upsetting or makes you stop and think, and you start thinking about things that are not necessarily conducive to sleeping. So I mean, that's the risk. And sometimes you choose to take that risk. There's certain things that I sometimes am following in the news. I know there's a potential I'm going to see something that's going to disturb my sleep. I no longer have insomnia, so I just kind of say, well, I really want to see this, and maybe it will ruin this particular night, but that's okay. It's not a problem. I'm just going to have more sleep drive for the next night, and I indulge. I try not to do that too much, because I am a person who is prone to waking up in the night thinking about things.
Right. Okay.
If you do struggle with sleep, I try to suggest that people not have devices in the bed, in part so that they can't check the time when they wake up. Really important.
Great. Some very useful tips there. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And I also wanted to touch on for a few minutes on the subject of sedative hypnotic medications, which are sometimes prescribed by someone's doctor to help them with sleep. Now, I understand you stress that you never encourage people to go against the advice of their doctor, but you also stress that while they shouldn't go against the advice, these medications are designed to help sleep as opposed to fix insomnia. So could you perhaps expand on the difference between the two?
Yeah, so the way a lot of these medications work is they don't create sleep. What they do is, through their sedative properties and the other effects that they have in the brain, they lower our arousal level. And so if you've not slept for a week or two very well, and you've had really rough, rocky sleep, that means your sleep drive is really high. If your sleep drive is really high, the only thing that's keeping you awake is that hyperarousal. So if you take something sedative, or if you take something that you believe is sedative, is going to create some sleep for you, you've externalized your sleep ability, and you've put your faith that sleep is going to come through this thing. Your arousal drops, and then it also may have actual sedative effects depending on what it is, and then sleep comes. So it doesn't create sleep in and of itself, but it just helps shortcut that part of us that tends to get in the way of our sleep, whether we know it's happening or not. And it's important to know that can happen with a medication. It can happen with a rigid routine before bed.
Right.
It can happen with a pillow spray. If you believe that this pillow spray is going to bring you your sleep, you're going to go, oh, yeah, I can sleep tonight because I've sprayed my pillow, and you stop worrying so much, and then the sleep comes.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
And I was very moved by some other words that you mentioned on your website. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to go through a few lines, and then we can maybe expand on it a little. So you said sleep is often considered an afterthought, the thing you try to fit in after and before everything else, in that little space of time where everyone else is sleeping, when the outside world has stopped, our inside world keeps whirling, though, until we no longer bend under the stresses of life, we break. Not sleeping robs you of energy, optimism, enthusiasm, and is a secret stealer of joy and calm in our lives. Again, loved the content on your website. And I wanted to touch on the last part of that, where you say that not sleeping robs you of your energy, optimism, enthusiasm, and is a secret stealer of joy and calm in our lives. Now, that's really interesting, because for those people who suffer with sleep problems, we don't often create that connection with good sleep and a wholesome and energized life. So I'd like you to maybe help us understand better how we can start understanding how powerful that connection is between the two.
Yeah, we don't usually think about it if we're sleeping well. It's something that you take for granted, right? You never realize how important your baby toe is until you stub it, and then you have to kind of limp around. So when we aren't sleeping well, the whole host of things happen physically. I mean, physically you're tired, and we start making choices that reduce the number of beautiful balloons in our frame, right? And so it's in part that physical fatigue. It's in part the fact that when we are sleep deprived, we tend to focus on the negative and discount the positive. Lots of really interesting studies on that. We have difficulty seeing things from different perspectives. So being able to say, okay, this is a situation, but I could view it this way or this way or this way or this way. And we become very tunnel vision. So if you combine those three things, a tendency to think negatively, a tendency to perseverate on things, and to not see things from multiple perspectives, that can influence so many areas of life. Being aware that it's doing it's really important, because you can step back from that a little bit and work on that seeing it from different perspectives angle, and some of the cognitive stuff's really important there. But we start making decisions about our life based on those biological facts, feeling like we don't have a choice because of fear, and then soon we don't see our friends anymore, we don't engage in our hobbies anymore, we become completely focused on getting more sleep, not really realizing that focusing on that to that extent is actually stealing even more stealing more sleep and stealing more joy.
Right. And one other thing that I've had a major problem with myself, and perhaps it's a bit of a selfish question because I know it affects me a great deal, is feeling guilty when I pass, say, 11 o'clock at night and I haven't managed to get to bed for whatever reason, whether that be I'm still doing something, or there's a program that I'm watching that I really want to finish, or I'm just unable to sleep. Is it okay? Should we be feeling guilty if we're not sleeping by a certain time? Or is it,
No,
again, different for each person?
it's going to be different for each person. Some people are wired. Some people are wired to kind of a 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. kind of sleeping
Right.
schedule. Again, this is genetically predisposed, and there's a bell curve. Some people like myself are more wired to be like 5 o'clock in the morning, 9 o'clock at night. We call that advanced phase shifts. And some people are delay phase. So if you think about teenagers, they naturally have a delay in their phase because of the changes in their brain that are affecting that part of the brain as well. So when teenagers go through late sexual maturity, parts of their brain are changing, and that just happens to affect their sleep while the changes are going on. So my son's a perfect example. He's 16. It is now 12:23, and he's only just woken up. And some people are just like that their whole life. They make great entrepreneurs. It's difficult for the 9 to 5 crowd if you happen to have that delay phase. In terms of people who are just staying up late because they're doing something that they enjoy, I think that's really important. If we become really fixated on bad things are going to happen if I'm not in bed by 11, short-term bad things, I'll be tired tomorrow, which is not a tragedy. start catastrophizing about the long-term consequences of doing it over and over, that creates more of a problem than staying up and doing something that you love.
Yeah. And you just mentioned there about waking up early, you yourself an early riser, 5 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be interested to know, did you make that decision to wake up at 5 a.m. because it's work related, or was it more so because of the energy that you get when you wake up at 5 a.m.? Because I tried this 5 a.m. start about 2 years ago whilst I
Mm-hmm.
was abroad living in Malta, and I tried it for about 2 weeks, getting up at 5 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no doubt that there is a certain energy outside at that time of day, which I absolutely felt. So I'd be
Mm.
interested to know the decision to wake up early for yourself. Where did that come from?
Yeah, so I think partly I'm predisposed to being an early riser.
Yeah.
It's easier and more pleasant when it's sunny outside, because here in the UK in the summertime it's broad daylight at 5 a.m. So I get up, grab my coffee, and I go out on the deck. It's an
Mm,
amazing way to start the day. But I've always been a little bit wired that way anyway. And I what I did that kind of reinforced that as a good thing is I engaged in a business development challenge, and we were all live online together at 5:30 in the morning. And I did that for a while and saw the kind of practical benefits, and then started marrying up the fact that I'm already an early riser. I already love the morning,
mm,
with those benefits. And so I became inclined to take on work, for example, in different time zones, that fit that quite neatly. So you'll see that a lot in people who are, or society tends to reinforce early rising being a good thing.
yeah.
So that gets a little bit of reinforcement. It's much harder for people who wake up at noon and go to sleep at 2 a.m. It's harder for them to kind of fit in the typical kind of 9 to 5 daytime job situation. So they also become inclined to take on work that suits their biology if they have the opportunity to do that. Lots of entrepreneurs have delay phase syndrome because they can work when it suits them.
Sure.
Yeah.
And now I know you work with lots of people, helping them with their sleep problems, helping them with insomnia. So I'm sure you come across different circumstances, different situations, different life experiences from the
Yeah.
people you work with. And what I wanted to ask was, considering all the different stories that you hear from people,
Mhm.
is it ever the case that people struggle with sleep because they are not um, exposing themselves to different life experiences other than work? Can focusing your day to day
Mm.
just on work, employment, or self employment, can that be a reason for poor sleep in circumstances?
I think that that's a tricky one. Some people find a tremendous amount of joy in their work, but it
Mm,
becomes the one thing that fills the frame in that kind of situation. And it just feels very unbalanced to
yeah.
me. It's hard for me to imagine not having these different pieces,
Mm,
right? Um, so whether you could say that that directly causes a sleeping problem long term, I think what you could potentially say is the more invested you are in one thing and the less balance you have with other things in your life, the bigger the impact is going to be if something's not going right. And the more likely that person would be to have some bad nights, which we all have. It's totally normal. A couple of weeks of rough sleep because of what's going on. If you don't have something to balance that, and you focus exclusively on one thing and the impact of that not sleeping on that one thing, that can blow things out of proportion quite quickly, I think.
right. Okay. And you also mentioned, 'cause we spoke on email and before this interview about a week ago, and you mentioned that you love productivity yourself.
Yeah.
You're a productivity enthusiast, and you use different productivity apps to help you throughout your day to day.
Mhm.
What I wanted to ask was, how long have you been using these, and what benefits have you gained from using them?
Gosh, how long? I've always been a little bit of a tech geek, and so I'm always kind of, somebody suggests an app and I have to go and try it and see. And if it's interesting enough,
Yeah.
I'll just convert all of my stuff to it and then use it exclusively, see if it meets my needs. it doesn't, I go back to the other thing. So I can waste a lot of time doing that, but I think that really using something 100% is the only way that you're going to really know if it works for you. Because I have so many different plates spinning, so I've got in-person clients, I have clients on Zoom, I have 3 different writing contracts, and everything has different deadlines. I love something that just as I fill it in, and as I kind of take a deadline and I backtrack what the programs coming out, I backtrack, I'm going to do this. I would never keep it straight in my mind if I was having to forward think it all the time. So my app just says, okay, Tracy, it is February, whatever day, I wake up and it tells me what I need to do to keep myself on track. And it's wonderful.
Right. And I imagine
I spend a lot less time wasting time figuring out what it is I should be doing, because if I input the stuff into the system well enough, it tells me what I need to do.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I imagine using apps like this for yourself helps you tremendously manage your own day and make sure that you sleep when you've planned to sleep.
Yeah. The thing that helps me with my sleep, the sleep related thing that it helps me with, is I know that everything is written down and taken care of.
Yeah.
And if I happen to be churning out kind of another project and something's kind of developing in my brain, I will then take extra time out right after dinner to just write it all out, because it's not helpful to be thinking about that at 2 o'clock in the morning, and my brain will start chewing on it while I'm sleeping, which doesn't help me with my sleep. So if I'm not reassured that it's taken care of, I'm more prone to wake up and think about it. So I just write it down.
Sure.
And then in the morning, I stick it into my system.
Right.
It's all in one place. It might just be really random things. And in that case, I just keep a little piece of paper by my bedside. I don't even turn the light on to do it. The actual act of making the thought physical and putting it on a piece of paper, even if I can't read it in the morning, is reassuring enough that that part of my brain switches off. It's okay, it's handled. I don't need to keep reminding her all night that this needs to happen.
Right. And now for those suffering from insomnia, as you know, it can be quite an unpleasant experience. And you've mentioned something else on your social media where you say it's important not to refer to yourself as being an insomniac. And you said that's important because you shouldn't literally name yourself the thing you are trying to get rid of. And I find that very interesting, because when we experience things like sleep problems and insomnia, it's very quickly to feel sorry for ourselves and perhaps put us in the little box as being someone who's insomniac. How can this be detrimental to us?
In so many different ways. Language is really, really powerful. So you're literally taking an issue that you're having and calling yourself that thing, right? That's very objectifying. There's a tendency to do it, I think, because when you're experiencing insomnia, not a lot of people really understand. If you say, oh, I have insomnia, and somebody says, oh, well, I've had a bad night's sleep for a couple nights too. It's a completely different thing. It's an independent problem that develops after those couple bad nights of sleep. So people often feel really alienated. So I think having that word kind of identifying with other people with the problem, and we are insomniacs, can be reassuring, but it's also a little bit of a trap because of that self-identification with the problem. Yeah, I mean, that's the biggest problem with it, I think. Language is so powerful, and what we tell ourselves about ourselves has huge consequences. I think it makes it more difficult to recover. If you go around with, I am an insomniac, stamped on your forehead on the inside, and you're referencing everything around you based on that as your fundamental identity. And when people use that word with me, I say, I don't know that word. Didn't you tell me about the other things in your life? Are you a parent? Tell me about your kids. Tell me about your cat. Tell me, to just, again, try to bring those things back into the frame so that their life identity is not the insomnia problem.
Right, interesting. And I imagine then they feel more comfortable in opening up to you so that
Mm,
you can help them. That's really interesting.
I hope
Now,
so, because you're relating as
yeah,
a person rather than as a person with one hat on and a person with another hat on.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you give a tremendous amount of yourself to your followers on social media. And I came across a couple of Q&A sessions that you like to do. So I'd be interested to
Yeah.
know what are the most common questions that people ask you when it comes to insomnia and sleep problems.
Yeah, my Q&As get very busy in my group. Every week we go for at least an hour. They're quite good. Um, that the themes tend to be, how do I manage with waking up in the middle of the night and not being able to fall back asleep? That's one of the most common ones. I get a lot of questions about managing hot flashes and hormonal changes in women in the perimenopausal, menopausal period of life, and then falling asleep questions. A lot of the questions are created from a background of what's the thing I need to do in order to fix this. And they soon quickly come to realize it's a little bit more complicated than taking the one thing. And if you just do that, that's the trick. I get asked all the time, what's a trick for doing this? What's a trick for doing that? I'm like, well, if you believe that's going to help you and it'll help in the short term
Yeah,
because you have faith in that thing, but it doesn't get to the underlying issue. It
right.
doesn't get to that underlying arousal that is keeping sleep from being able to come more readily.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
And I mean, from your experience, would you say the majority of the people you work with are female? If so, is that something you've purposely targeted, or is it perhaps that males struggle sometimes to come forward and seek help and advice about sleep problems?
I think it's you hit the nail on the head there. I do have more female followers, and in my group, more people, more women engage than men do, and I think it is that reluctance to come forward and ask for help. I haven't designed it that way. I think it's
Yeah,
really, you see that in healthcare settings of lots of different kinds as well. Very similar kind of ratio turns up. And you'll have a gentleman come in and say, well, my wife made me come.
right.
It's really not uncommon.
Okay. So what would be your advice then for males who clearly have a problem with insomnia?
Mhm.
What can they do to make them feel that, look, it's okay to seek advice?
I think it depends on what's preventing them in the first place. One, it's not a character flaw to
Mm,
have insomnia. There should be no judgment around you having insomnia. Everybody has sleeping problems. Some people are more prone to developing insomnia off the back of a sleeping problem than others. If that is an even gender split. That's simply a human condition, and you're a human being first, and then you are male second. So to just not hesitate to come forward and ask for help. The longer it goes on, the harder it is to treat.
right. Now, please forgive me if my next question is daft, but I really want to ask it because I don't know if this is a link.
Yeah, go for
So,
it.
is there a link at all between having bad dreams, nightmares, with not sleeping well, or are they completely disconnected?
So there is a separate disorder called nightmare disorder. And people can have that without having insomnia. Obviously, people can have insomnia without having nightmare disorder. Certainly, people having nightmares can develop fears around going to bed because of those, which can create insomnia. Um, the lack of sleep as a result of the emotional content of the content of the dream can cause people to have anxiety about not getting enough sleep, and having really negative experiences in bed and associating the bed with those negative experiences by, say, trying to stay in bed to get more sleep after a nightmare. That can predispose and send somebody down the road to developing sleeping problems as well.
Right. Okay. And snoring is also one subject that comes up quite a bit in relation to sleep, sleeping problems. Is snoring another indicator to having issues with sleep, or again, are they unrelated?
Yeah, so snoring is a really, really, this is a great question. So when I'm screening people, one of the things that I do is there are two forms. One is a screener that includes questions about snoring, how loud it is, how frequent it is, how disruptive it is. And one is talking about sleepiness in the daytime. And the reasons these two screeners are really important is that they screen for something called sleep apnea. People who snore may have sleep apnea. Now, sleep apnea is it's very under recognized, undertreated. People just think, oh, well, you're snoring. And then they're really sleepy all day.
Yeah.
And like, well, I slept all night, I snored all night, etc., etc. And having sleep apnea is the thing that's associated with lots of these health consequences. It's really important to treat it. And it's not safe for me to suggest some of the techniques that I suggest if somebody has untreated sleep apnea, because it makes them sleepier. The biggest difference between the daytime experience of somebody who snores and has sleep apnea and somebody who has insomnia is that somebody with sleep apnea will be more prone to falling asleep right in the car, sitting quietly on the sofa, sitting in quiet conversation. They'll just literally be falling asleep. And that's because they have woken up sometimes 50 times an hour without even realizing it. With somebody with insomnia, because they have so much of that arousal and anxiety and that radar focused on sleep and not sleeping being dangerous, that actually is a 24/7 phenomenon. It actually keeps them a little more functional during the daytime. So that snoring question is a really good one, because there's so many people who have sleep apnea and it goes unrecognized and untreated. And it's really important to treat it. Now, people who have sleep apnea can also have insomnia, but you have to treat the sleep apnea first.
Right. Okay. Now, especially in the summer, when the sun is glaring into our rooms, whether that be a bedroom or our living room downstairs, the afternoon nap is something that I delve into sometimes, because it's a great feeling. Half an hour, an hour nap in the sunshine.
Mhm.
If we do that in the summer, say, can it have a negative impact on our sleep at night, or would you encourage that?
Right. I think that comes down to whether or not you have sleeping trouble at night anyway. So
Right.
I used to hate taking a nap when I was a kid. My mother would make me take naps and I would just lay there fuming, absolutely. Because she needed a break. I get it now. She's like, I just need you to go away and be quiet so I don't have to worry about you. So to go take a nap. And now that I'm an adult, I love taking a nap. It feels like such luxury, right? But if you're a good sleeper, that 30-minute nap is probably not going to be very consequential on your nighttime sleep. If you have insomnia, though, it can have a really important negative knock-on effect on your sleep, because there are the two kind of key things that regulate our sleep. One of them is sleep drive. Sleep drive basically builds throughout the day. It's built by being awake and it's built by being physically active. So taking a nap, you're reducing your physical activity, but more importantly, you're reducing the wakefulness part by actually sleeping. And so that can take a dent out of your sleep drive. And if your sleep drive's low, it's difficult to fall asleep, it's difficult to stay asleep. And those are the two main complaints for people with insomnia. So I generally suggest, if you are somebody who has difficulty with sleeping, if you have to take a nap for safety reasons, because you're literally feeling sleepy, then do it. Earlier in the day is better. Short is good, like 20 minutes. That's cool. If you end up sleeping there for 3 hours, it's going to cause you difficulty. And then go to bed a little bit later, just to make up that little bit of that lost sleep drive that you might have lost by taking the nap.
Right. Okay. And I imagine when a lot of people come to you for help with their sleep problems, with insomnia, they probably come to you with an enormous amount of a lack of confidence. And I mean, confidence is a big thing, especially when it comes to sleep problems. It can knock your confidence quite a bit. So what would you say for people who are in this position, who want to start feeling a bit better about their situation, and not to feel too guilty about the problems that they're suffering with sleep.
So I'm not sure if you're meaning this directly about confidence in their ability to sleep, or if you're meaning general confidence, but certainly one of the reasons why CBTI starts with something called time in bed restriction is it's a very quick reminder to people that their sleeping system is still working. If we're tired during the day, we tend to look at that as being a really bad thing. And the less well you sleep, the more fatigued you feel. You start feeling sleepy, and we associate that with, oh my goodness, I've not had enough sleep, and then all these bad things are going to happen. But actually realizing that that's a sign that the system is actually doing what it's supposed to do, and we need to kind of get out of its way. We can massage things a little bit to optimize that, but that's actually a really powerful reminder for somebody. So if I'm speaking with somebody who says, it takes me hours and hours to fall asleep, we make some changes to their kind of sleep scheduling. And I tend to do that a little bit more loosely and not too rigidly, because I don't want people watching the time. The watch is the biggest hanger-oner of anxiety for people with insomnia. But they learn really quickly, wow, I'm really, really sleepy, but I prepare them for that. Like, that is a good thing. And then very quickly they are able to fall asleep, and it builds their confidence that actually it's still in there. Haven't lost it, just lost touch with it a little bit.
Right.
The more they can have that experience, the more they can extrapolate that experience. If they're beginning to get better sleep, even if it's not a lot of sleep, the sleep quality improves, so they can function better in the daytime. And that, so it has a knock-on positive effect in the various things that people engage in, whether it's work or relationships. They might be a little less sharp and irritable with their kids or whatever. So that is very helpful.
Sure. Now, in a moment, I'm going to ask you to share with us how people can get in touch with you, stay in touch with you, connect with you on social media. And also, I believe you have a very special sleep club as well, which people can join. But before we do that, I just wanted to switch gears slightly with you and talk about your experience, because I believe, and this is actually something I was pondering when I came across your Instagram profile. I was trying to figure out your accent. And then I looked online, and I initially thought you're based in the UK, which I believe you are at the moment, but originally you're from America. Is that right?
I am.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And you're also registered with the American Council on Exercise and the US Registry of Exercise Professionals in the States. So I'd be interested to know how you found that transition with working in America with what you do now and then transitioning to the UK. Have you found a difference in people's approach to sleep problems? Do they approach it in different ways
Right.
from a cultural sense?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So my journey is that my background, I have a degree in psychology and worked in community mental health. So sleep wasn't a focus, but it was certainly a component of people's experience in that kind of setting. And when I moved to the UK, I actually trained as an osteopath. And again, in people with pain, particularly chronic pain, the acceptance and commitment therapy piece is very, very helpful, but applying that to sleep issues as well. And so I did further training in how to support people, and then branched the sleep piece out as mostly what I do now. So I didn't do sleep coaching specifically in the States, although it was a part of the work that I did. What's really interesting is I think there's perhaps a more of a cultural push to tell people they need to get more sleep. And this is how you can do it, because they can advertise medications on television. And so you have a lot of people going, well, I saw this thing on TV, I'm going to go see my doctor, and basically batter them into giving it to me. I would say neither country is really great about having enough CBTI trained professionals. But it's not just the two countries, it's globally. There's not enough people to serve the need. And in stressed, pressured health systems, it's impossible for even a trained GP to do a session within the time that's allowed, even if they knew. And it's just not as accessible as it should be. And that's across the pond on both sides, unfortunately.
Sure. Now, we'll share in a moment, as I said, how people can get in touch with you via social media, your website, of course. Can we speak a bit about the sleep club that you have, where people
Yeah.
can join your sleep club to get help with any sleep problems they may have? And I believe the website is sleepclub.tracythesleepcoach.co.uk. So could you give us a bit more
Yeah.
information about this and how it works?
Right. The sleep club itself is coming soon.
Right.
But I do run a free Facebook group that functions as a sleep club. And
Right.
the future sleep club will look different, will be a bit more comprehensive, and I'll be in there a lot more. Although I'm there quite a lot in my group, but the group itself it's small, it's intimate. I'm in
Hmm.
there every day. We do an hour-long Q&A every Thursday. We do a mindfulness exercise together every Monday, and it's my favorite time of the week, going in there and doing that Q&A in that group, because it's such a fantastic group of people. It gives me tons of energy, and I think just my bent is it makes me feel good to give something to people that they
Yeah.
can use in a safe and kind of safe environment and at a safe level. Even if they can't afford my services, right? Because not everybody can. I think that everybody has the ability to reconnect to their natural sleep ability.
Yeah.
And so this is kind of my space where I can do I can help people for free to the degree that it's safe for me to do. And sometimes people don't end up needing my services even. We have people in that group that have done really, really well just off the back of what they've learned in the group and learning how to apply it to themselves.
Great.
So yeah, it's my favorite space online. It's called Sound Sleep Strategies on Facebook.
So that's sound sleep strategies or
Yeah.
strategy
Strategies.
strategies. So sound sleep strategies on Facebook. So
Yeah.
you can connect with Tracy Hannigan on there. And also we mentioned your Instagram earlier. That's how I came across you for the first
Yeah.
time. So I just wanted to mention how people can do that. I believe it's your Instagram handle, which is at Tracy the Sleep Coach. That's at Tracy the Sleep Coach. And I do advise, if you're interested in getting help with your sleep problems, with insomnia, please do go check out Tracy Hannigan on Instagram. And of course, just a reminder about your website as well, tracythesleepcoach.co.uk. Is that right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
They pretty much, if you put Tracy the Sleep Coach in, all of my stuff comes up.
Brilliant. Good
Yeah.
stuff. Now, before we end, just wanted to ask, is there anything else that you wanted to mention with regards to sleep problems or anything else about your work that I may have missed in the questions?
This was the best interview I have ever done, I have to say.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I really appreciate that.
It's been really wonderful. We've touched on a lot of different pieces, some practical pieces, some kind of more profound pieces about people's mindset,
Mm,
and viewing sleep. And it's always really important for me to want to share that, because it is really common. Somebody will say, well, what are the 3 things I need to do to fix my insomnia? I'm like, well, do you have 3 hours, or do you want 30-second sound bites that are not going to be helpful? And so I really appreciated the opportunity to have all of the rich context that this has conversations brought out. It's fantastic.
No, thank you. I really appreciate that. And as I was saying earlier, I was really looking forward to this episode. I was thinking to myself, okay, this is the subject. Who can I bring on? And I really believe in timing when it comes to the universe. And I think this was the best. This was the best timing. I was supposed to come across yourself. Yeah. I mean, I have some episodes which are great, but there are other episodes that have special meaning and significance. And for me, this is one of them because it's quite personal to me as well. And to connect with someone who has vast knowledge on the subject has been really meaningful. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you
And I
so
really
much for the
appreciate your time.
opportunity.
No, no, not at all. Pleasure was all mine.
Pleasure.
And just before we end, just a quick reminder, guys, if you want to check out Tracy Hannigan's work, just another quick reminder, Instagram at Tracy the Sleep Coach and her website, tracythesleepcoach.co.uk. And please do go connect with her if you want more information about her work, and also if you want help yourself with your sleep problems and insomnia. Thank you once again for tuning in. You were watching the Sabir Bhatti Show. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Until next time, take care of yourself. Bye-bye.